She makes it happen herself. It's a time loop.
Okay, I see what you're saying, and I had that thought too. I don't like it though, so I kind of want to reject it. Because I don't like time travel movies.
Well, I do. This is a segment I'm calling Mike Makes Us Into a Time Travel Movie. Because I want to. I think they're cool. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Steam-Powered Movies. I'm one of your hosts, producer and engineer Mike Fraedrich, and I'm here with...
Hello, my name is Dana Fraedrich. I am a steampunk and fantasy author extraordinaire.
All right, and we are here for another episode of the Steam-Powered Movies podcast. It's a podcast where we watch a steampunk movie and we talk about it. We talk about steampunk elements, what makes it a steampunk movie, talk about some stuff we liked, some stuff that we didn't like, if we can think of anything or find anything in this fantastic film. And then at the end, we'll give it our own special ratings. So stick around to the end for that. So today we watched the 2004 animated film by legendary animator and director Hayao Miyazaki. Based on the novel by Diana Wynne Jones, we watched Howl's Moving Castle.
Yes, and just to cover what exactly steampunk is for anyone who is not aware, just very briefly, a good way to describe it is kind of Victorian sci-fi. So you're not going to have like spaceships and stuff, but like think about Victorian era technology with some artistic license taken, maybe some extrapolation of that technology, that sort of thing. And you see a lot of it in this movie. So this is another really, really good film that if you're not familiar with kind of like what steampunk is, Howl's Moving Castle is so good for it. So good. Sorry, I just love this movie so much.
And it's so good. Yeah, it's a really good movie. It is extremely steampunk.
Yeah.
And a lot of the elements of it. Oh my goodness. I've seen this film several times before, but watching it now through that lens of trying to catch all the things, I'm like, oh wow, it's everywhere. It's all over the place. So we'll get started. We'll talk about, what makes this a steampunk movie? What are the steampunk things in it? I'll say from the very first image we see is like a mech house emerging from the fog. What a great start.
That, and there's also the scene where Sophie, our main character, she's coming up the hill and the house like crests the hill and it just like rises above that line and it looks so stinking cool. That is one of the very cool things about Hayao Miyazaki is that his visuals are just so on point. Mm-hmm. They're so thoughtful. There are a couple of scenes that immediately come to mind when we're talking about like his films, like in Spirited Away, when I know he has a name. I forget the kind of like spirit in the bathhouse who is like kind of a spirit of gluttony or something like that. And he's just like eating all the things.
Was it
and basically,
No Face? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, No Face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like there's that scene where like he's sort of like leaning back and his arms are up and then like the entire frame besides him is basically just full of people carrying platters of food. Obviously, the Spirited Away is not the film we're talking about today, but this is just another example of like just these like amazing, thoughtful visuals of just like all the cool stuff that like this movie wants to give you. Like all of his kind of like opening shots and some of these like very clear tableaus are making promises of like, this is what you can expect from this film. Like with Spirited Away, you're going to get all this like richness and like kind of craziness and stuff. With Howl's Moving Castle, you're going to get all kinds of steampunk goodies.
Yeah. And yeah, like you said, that first shot makes promises. It's kind of dark and foreboding. Then you get the cool mechanical thing. And then like 3 seconds later, they're just traipsing through a pretty field. It's like, okay, we get a little bit of everything here. We get some whimsy, some lightheartedness, some darkness. It's, and we watched a bunch of Miyazaki films. Mm-hmm. I think we've watched all of his films.
We've watched
recently.
All of them. There are a couple I know of that I think are just way lesser known and possibly, I don't even think they're dubbed, that we haven't seen.
Right. Oh, yeah. And to clarify, we did watch the dubbed version of this. A lot of not American, not English-speaking films, it's maybe better to watch subtitles, but I think some of Miyazaki's films, like there was real effort made to do really good English dubs, and this was one of them. I think this is one that has really good We got Christian Bale playing Howl. We got, in my mind, the star of the show, Billy Crystal as Calcifer.
Billy Crystal does steal the show. He is so good.
He really does. I think a lot of these anime dubs, even the good ones, there are parts where it kind of feels like they're just reading the lines. They're not really giving performance. And I think it could be tough, too, sometimes with the space they're given, because you have to fit the words in the space where the characters are moving their mouths. And if they're not speaking English, it might not be an appropriate space. But like, so it doesn't always feel like a performance. But in this one, I feel like Billy Crystal really gives like a start to finish performance as Calcifer, and it's great.
I'm going to pick you up on that a little bit, because I think, to be fair and to be clear, you and I have not seen a ton of anime and Japanese created media. Like, I think we both have a smattering under our belts. Like, you were a big, let me try that again. You were a very big fan of Cowboy Bebop?
Yeah.
Yeah, Cowboy Bebop. I'm a really big Fruits Basket fan, so I've seen that. I've seen basically almost every iteration of Sailor Moon. So, but neither of us have seen a ton. I think I've seen a little bit more than you, though.
Possibly, yeah. I've seen stuff here and there. I watched them in high school, but it's been a while.
I think that there is, just like with any, I'm going to go ahead and say TV, since most of them are series, you get some really good stuff, and you get some stuff that's kind of meh. So yeah, like I'm not going to agree with you on that. Like, a lot of it feels like a line reading, because I think some of it is just outstanding. There was an original Fruits Basket version, and there was I think 2019 version of Fruits Basket, and they're both very good. The 2019 version I think is better, but I think that's also just because it was such a popular series. They had more money.
Right.
But we are digressing. And that's going to happen because this is such a rich movie, and like there's so many facets to it. So like I'm going to be talking about the book as well, because I have read the book.
Oh, cool.
I think twice.
I actually forgot it was based on a book. I've seen this movie like a bunch of times, but forgot there was a book.
Yeah.
First, yeah.
And it's been years since I read the book, so I forget certain pieces. But the film also deviates quite a bit from the book. Like, it kind of starts out in the same place.
Oh, right.
But I think like I would say like the last third or quarter of the book is very, very different than the film.
Okay.
Like, we cut entire characters, we added characters. So I think it stays true to the spirit of the book, though. I highly recommend it, by the way, friends. It's charming. It's sweet. It's really, really just like very much like the same kind of themes that you see in the film, with like found family and finding your own power within you and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. It's so sweet. But one thing I do want to say is the book is not steampunk. The book is kind of just written in like, that sort of typical like semi-modern market kind of town period. It's not like high fantasy, which is generally very medieval. It's just kind of like not quite modern, but slightly modern-ish town initially. Except there is an entire subplot which takes place in our world. Weirdly, like there's this crazy subplot where Howl's sister lives in our world, which presumably means Howl grew up in our world. And then these are like other universes that he discovered and now also partially inhabits. Because like he drives a car with Sophie in it, and they give a video game to his nephew to play.
Weird. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
This is totally
like
different then. Yeah.
The book deviates, or rather the movie deviates from the book quite a lot.
So in the book are the fantastical elements, like the castle, is it just magic? Is it just portrayed as being like pure magic? The house moves and has all these portals and things like that? Pretty
much. I mean, the portal door is basically the same. You've got the colors to kind of indicate which world you're visiting.
Right. And is Calcifer still a fire?
Yeah, Calcifer's still like I don't remember in the book if he was a fire demon specifically, because demon is the word used in the film. Mm-hmm. Because in the book it was that Howl swallowed a falling star. I don't remember if they made the demon connection.
Which is what's portrayed visually in the film as well. I wonder if like the word choice of demon was like a translation thing. Maybe they're looking for a word that's like spirit, but not like necessarily all good, maybe like a chaotic kind of spirit thing, and maybe demons what they landed on. Maybe we should do more research on these things. But I mean, it's a fun idea to think about, that maybe that's something that we wouldn't, that's not what was in the original Japanese. But
well, I do, from what I very, very little that I do know. And friends, you can tweet us some better education on this if you wish. What's
at Steam Powered Pod? Yep.
At Steam Powered Pod. But from what I understand, the word demon is more like a spirit, and they can be bad, but not necessarily are always bad.
Right.
Like, for instance, in was it Princess Mononoke? Who had that, like, the little forest spirits that, like, kind of like clickety clack?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, those are spirits. They're not really demons, and they're not evil. So I think it's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, and I wonder for this film too, that in the beginning, the mention of like wizards and witches and demons is all by like the townsfolk who are like scared of it. They're portraying it as something scary and not to mess with. So maybe that's another way that the choice of the word demon gets across, that like, oh, this is a scary thing. So they just were like consistent with it and calling Calcifer a fire demon instead of just like fire spirit or something.
Yeah, like I said, I can't remember in the book if he was a fire demon, but in the book they are witches and wizards.
Okay.
Like they're people who basically have shown some modicum of talent and have kind of like harnessed their power and use it in various ways. In fact, in the book, Sophie's a witch. But she just doesn't realize it until much, much later. Like, she basically like is told at the end, like, you're a witch. Like, you spoke power into this like walking stick that she has all the time that basically became her magic wand.
Huh. That's curious. So I mean, this film, there's like not any exposition given. There's no explanation. What I actually really like about it, it makes the whole like first half of the film even more immersive, that you're learning what this world is about. You're learning what's going on by watching, instead of just having a scene where they like, sit you down and be like, and this is this, and this is that, and this is witches and wizards. It's like you're kind of just experiencing it as if you're dropped in the world, which I really like when a film does that. And this one does it really, really well. So I wonder if that's something that like Sophie being a witch and becoming like into her powers at the end of something that Miyazaki was like consciously aware of and like leaving in there, just not explaining.
Oh, I guarantee that. Because I mean, he obviously knew the source material. Mm-hmm. And while it didn't follow the narrative storyline super closely, like I said, like the first half or so, it does pretty closely-ish. But like I said, the second half / third / quarter, it just goes like in a totally different direction.
Yeah, because there is that scene at the end where Calcifer's talking about like, well, only Howl can do these things with me, and only Howl can control me or take me out of the house, and she does those things. So maybe that's a manifestation of showing that she has these witch powers as well. She just doesn't know it, doesn't know how to use it. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was on purpose.
That might have been kind of the unspoken way of saying that.
Yeah. So I ask about, you know, is the house just all magic in the book? Because I do really like knowing that the book is not steampunk. I like the choice to bring in the steampunk elements to kind of blend the magic and real worldness of it. It makes it kind of more believable, but also creates just like a richer texture for this world he's created.
I know what you mean. And I totally agree. Like, I don't know what source materials he used, because if I'm honest, I don't know my steampunk history super well. There's a really great video that we can link to in the show notes about kind of like, I think it was like, what are we in, the second or third wave of steampunk? This is getting very nitty gritty, something like that. Like I said, I will link a video in the show notes for this really great video that kind of describes the wave of steampunk that we're currently in and kind of where it started. Mm-hmm. But the current wave kind of started in 2009-ish with Sherry Priest's book Bone Shaker. And this movie came out in 2004. I honestly don't know what like big steampunk influences there are. I mean, obviously besides, you know, Jules Verne and like H.G. Wells, because, you know, they're kind of the fathers of steampunk. I don't know what influences besides that Hayao Miyazaki might have been working with, but like they are just everything. Like we have steam powered trams. We've got the kind of the lowered train with kind of like the trench through the town. I love that detail so much.
Yeah. I kind of had like a list of all the things, but there's like a progression from real thing that existed to things that like probably could have existed all the way up to like more fantastical. So you've got like the steamboats and the steam trolley, which were like real things, right? Then you've got the steam cars, which are kind of off. It's just like they're just a little bit off. It's like I don't think that was a thing in real life.
Steam trolley wasn't a thing, by the way. If you're talking about the trams.
Oh, it wasn't?
Not really. We had, because this is actually research I've had to do for the book that's going to be coming out in the autumn. They were horse-drawn trams, and then eventually they became electric. Like we were in Amsterdam? No, one of those. Austria?
Rotterdam.
One of the
Somewhere in Europe.
European countries that we went to. Do you remember all the cables?
Oh, yeah.
That were like all over the place. Like it was basically like that, where, more rudimentary kind of thing, but they were run on electricity, and they might have been run on diesel at some point too. But horse-drawn trams was like the original.
Okay, yeah. Well, I guess they got me then with the steam trolley. I was like, that looks like a real thing. And then you had the steam cars, like I said, a little off. And then you've got like the airships. That you're getting more fantastical with the airships.
Yeah.
Which were cool. And then obviously Howl's Castle, which is like all the gears and steam powered and the walking thing, and so cool.
But it was also calcifer powered.
Yes.
Yeah, which is the way that's knit into the narrative is extremely cool. The thing with like a steam powered tram, the difficulty would be in miniaturization. Like you think about the size of a locomotive, that thing is bloody huge. And just like with computers, computers started out these enormous honking machines that took up like an entire room, and now they're a phone that fits into our palm. Like miniaturization is the really hard part,
right?
Especially with something that requires physical fuel like steam. You have to have some kind of fuel, whether coal or wood, and then you have to have a reservoir for the water to create the steam. So this miniaturization is extremely difficult.
Well, that's the cool thing about sci-fi,
right?
Or steampunk is sci-fi, that you can just be like, I'm not going to explain it. It's just a smaller thing that's steam powered. Deal with it.
And I think with storytelling, there are certain things you can get away with. Like Gail Carriger totally does this in her not the Parasol Protectorate. The series that came first was Finishing School, and there was Bumbersnoot, who's a little mechanical dachshund, like a little steam powered dachshund, and he is so cute. And that's one of those examples of like, ooh, they made it real tiny. He's like a tiny boiler inside of him. And, she does such a good job setting it up where you're like, I don't even care. Like,
right.
He's a cute mechanical dog. I will take it.
Yeah. And they threw in some other things in this too that I think Miyazaki carries over into some of his other things. Like, I remember like the solo piloted, like winged thing that they ride.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a steam powered thing, but it's like a futuristic kind of technology thing. That is just really cool. Another thing that just gets blended into this, you can't place it in like an Earth time period, like at all, I don't think, based on the look or technology or anything. But it's just like, yeah, here's a world that came up with steam and with magic, and it's kind of blending all this stuff together.
Yeah. But it's only certain people with magic. It's one of those stories where only a select few of people have magic, and some people use it for good. Some people don't so much. For instance, in the book, I forget her name. I want to say Mrs. Fairfax, but I think I'm conflating that with Jane Austen.
Okay.
Because Mrs. Fairfax is someone in Jane Austen. But there's a witch in Howl's Moving Castle, the book, and she includes honey in all of her spells. And she's like, just kind of like a innocuous, like helpful, friendly witch who gets involved in some of the shenanigans there at the end of the book.
Right. I do like in the beginning where you find out, you see the castle, and then you cut to the hat shop, and there's Sophie and like her sisters talking in the background and stuff, and they're like, oh, it's Howl, and you're like, oh, okay, so I guess it's like a known person. and then they mention like witches and wizards, like, oh, so I guess you will know about witches and wizards. And then later on they're like, oh yeah, wizards have shops and they sell spells and they're helpful, and so it's like, oh, okay. But I like that progression of, as the viewer, being like, okay, what's all this weird stuff? And then, you know, from a certain perspective, you're learning about more of these things. Kind of how Sophie does too. She comes from her own little corner of the world and thinking that Howl's dangerous and witches are bad. And by the end, she's like, has this family of all these fantastical, you know, different kind of people.
I don't think it's that. I don't think there's a thought process that like witches and wizards are bad, because they gave us very specific examples. Howl is a wizard and he is bad because he eats beautiful girls' hearts, which I think is a throwback to the book, because he's a very bad book boyfriend. I totally had a crush on movie Howl, not on book Howl. Book Howl's kind of a douche canoe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
He gets better. It's kind of part of his whole thing. But yeah, he dates these girls and then he kind of gets bored with them. And then he runs away from them and just like leaves them high and dry, like wondering like what happened.
I guess they kind of alluded to that.
They did a bit. They kind of kept that.
Yeah, that like the part where Calcifer's like, oh, well, it's a character trait they built into Howl in the movie that he runs away.
And he is a drama llama.
And he is a drama llama. Oh my goodness, that scene where he just melts.
Yeah.
And Calcifer's like, yeah, he did this one time when a girl dumped him.
Yeah.
So I guess he avoids getting dumped by running away because he doesn't want to. But he's such a drama llama. So much drama.
Yeah.
And Sophie's probably the first person to be like, come on, dude. Like, really? Really? Calls him out on his crap.
Yeah. But also with the witches and wizards thing too, again, they have a very specific example of the Witch of the Waste. It's not like all witches and all wizards are bad. I think they were very careful to not do that, because that gets into dodgy territory pretty quickly of like, everyone who's like this is bad. Like everyone who has these inherent traits about themselves, not like choices they make, but rather like things that they just are. That gets into real dodgy territory really fast. So I think they were very good in being careful to have, these specific examples, the Witch of the Waste, Howl, for these things that they do. Right.
But I think it's still like, for me, like a thing that you learn throughout the movie. Like I think at the very beginning you could think like, oh, you know, Hal's an evil wizard and he's bad. Like, because I mean, they're all bad, but then you learn from watching that no, they're not all bad. You know,
no, they don't. They never say that they're all bad. Like Suleiman is the advisor to the king, and she's a witch. But the ones that we hear about first are Howl and the Witch of the Waste. But I think we only hear about them first because they show up first in the narrative.
Sure. And speaking of that narrative, I find it cool, the thing that this movie, and maybe the book does too, but in the very beginning, like the first 5 minutes is when Sophie meets Howl because he rescues her from the bad guys in the street. And
I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that whole scenario.
Sure. And then he like takes her on this little like flying adventure, and it reminded me, it's kind of like the Superman movie with like Lois Lane flying, or like the Aladdin with A Whole New World. I can show you the world. Right. It's like that scene, but it's in the first like 4 minutes at least. Like it's super near the beginning. And so instead of that being like the payoff of like, oh, I'm pursuing this mysterious guy, it's like, no, this mysterious guy just shows up. You get that scene right away, and it kind of deflates some expectations perhaps. And then she gets turned into an old lady, and you're like, all right, no, what's the rest of the movie going to be?
I do like that, because they kind of go at it from like a Beauty and the Beast kind of angle, but I think that this is a very fresh take on it. Because it's like, oh, like this, beautiful girl, and of course she's going to end up with the Beast or whatever, but like she has her own journey to go on. Like she's got her own agency to discover.
Right.
And I think it's really good. I will say on the fantastical pieces of the story that you mentioned, I feel like that's always a very tough artistic decision to make, because I've been in critique groups, I've been in writing groups where people are just not familiar with fantasy, and like some of this is just, look, you're just going to have to like figure out who your audience is and tailor your book to them, because somebody who's just not familiar with fantasy at all, like you're basically going to have to make a choice as to like, are you going to leave them behind, or are you going to try to like hold their hand and bring them along? This movie obviously is like look, you're either on board or you're not.
Right.
Like, you're going to be very confused if you're sitting here trying to figure out, like, what is even magic?
Yeah. Yeah. They don't really explain it, but so I'm going to pepper in as we go some quotes I wrote down that I really liked.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the beginning of the movie. I just like this line where one of the first things that Hal says is, "Don't be alarmed. I'm being followed. Act normal."
I know. I love it.
And then immediately she shows her nervous face. And I'm like, of course you can't act normal after someone tells you to act normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that this movie makes a lot of very intentional decisions. And I think that really works to its benefit. Like you were saying, like, we just get right into it. Like, there is magic, there are witches, there are wizards, there are like all of these like steampunk elements. This is what this movie is. I hope you're with us, because otherwise you're going to be very confused.
Yeah. Just go along for the ride.
Yeah.
Go along for it. And that's kind of how I see this movie. Even having seen it several times, it's not as much about the plot. There is a plot. There's a definite plot, but it's like a fantastical adventure, like in this world to me. When I'm watching it, at least that's how I experience it when I'm watching it. I'm just in the world experiencing all these things. I'm not really, and I'm like a plot person. Like, I'm really into plots. But when I'm watching this movie, I'm not really thinking about, oh, what's going to happen next, or oh, what about this thing that was set up earlier. I'm just along for the ride.
Mm-hmm. This does not follow, I think, the typical linear story progression, because we have a lot of kind of looking back and looking forward and looking back. Like, Sophie has this moment where I think it's a dream. I think it's like sort of proposed that it's a dream, where she sees Howl come in and there's like that tunnel and stuff.
I have a thing on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then like she wakes up and it's like, oh, actually, did any of that happen? Unknown. So yeah, it doesn't really follow this just linear storyline, which I think, again, they do really well. And I think it works really well for this because there's so much character work happening. Sophie's like dealing with her stuff and her curse and everything. Calcifer and Howl are like all wrapped up together in like their, I'm going to say, bond, for lack of a better term. And then, of course, you know, you've got the Witch of the Waste, who even has kind of a journey and stuff.
Yeah.
You've got Turnip Head's journey. Like, everyone is like kind of just going on and like all of this like character stuff for them. And I think that all of those threads are pulled together really well, but it's done in a way that's not...
It's not real obvious. It's not explaining it to you. It's peppering in those little things here and there. I was noticing that every little bit of dialogue that's peppered in that might seem like a throwaway line or something like that, it means something, and it probably comes back later. You know, like the Witch of the Waste saying, "Oh, what a pretty fire," whenever she sees Calcifer. Like, that's a setup for a later payoff. Because that's her thing.
Yeah.
It's whatever her thing with like younger men or something is. But
she's got a demon of greed.
That's what
it is.
So
that's why she wants Hal's heart. She wants and wants and wants and wants.
But there's something specific out, like, oh, young men are so attractive and nice. Like, that's part of her greed. Is one of the things she's greedy for, you know, I think. But
no, I think she literally takes men's hearts.
Well, maybe.
In like the most literal sense.
I mean, that's possible. I was reading it more metaphorically, but okay, maybe more literal.
Oh no, I think she might be a literal man-eater.
You know what? You could be right. You could be right. Though I think there's one of the things I wrote down in my notes is there's a lot of metaphor happening in this movie. I think we could talk for an hour about the metaphors.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what they all mean, but I get like pieces of the stuff, like the spell that's put on Sophie. I'm not exactly sure. There's like a reason it's on her, and it's the thing that she's dealing with. I don't like. Do you? How do you interpret the spell on her?
Her curse, because I feel like her curse is very nuanced, where it's not just ta-da, you're an old lady now. Ba-da-ba. It's more like because you know, we see her opening up. She doesn't really have much of a social life. She doesn't really have much self-esteem. Like, she's just kind of living out her father's dream for her. We learn that the hat shop belonged to her father, so that's why she's holding on to it. And you know, she's trying to, you know, do the duty of the eldest daughter and, you know, carry on that legacy and everything. But she's not really living her own life.
Right.
And so I feel like the curse is more of like, all right, you're now going to embody this sort of burden that you've taken on for someone else. And it's when she kind of forgets herself and everything she's carrying that you see her in her true state, like when she's sleeping and Hal kind of like peeks in at her sleeping and stuff, not in a creepy way. It was very sweet.
Right.
You know, and she's
Not
back
like
to her
Edward
younger
Cullen.
self. Yeah, no, not like I'm watching you sleep. And you know, we had these moments where like they're in the huge flower field together and she's having such a good time and like she is herself, and then as soon as she like remembers like, oh no, like I can't be free like this, she like reverts back to like the old slumped woman.
Yeah, Hal's like, you're beautiful, and she's like, no, I'm not, I'm ugly, and then she turns into the old lady again.
I don't think she said I'm ugly. I think she just is kind of like rejecting like this idea of a life she could have, because again, that life she could have is not the life that like her father sort of left behind for her.
Yeah, I wrote this down. I was noticing, there were some points where she didn't look old. And I think even as the movie goes on, even when she is the old lady, she looks less old.
Oh, she definitely goes through progressions. There's time where she looks kind of middle-aged, where she's kind of like on this crossroads kind of thing. It's done extremely well. Again, very thoughtful.
Even the voice work, I think, does really well with hitting those transitions and the in-between parts. I know there was two different people doing the voice of young Sophie and old Sophie, but there's certain parts where it's so in between. I'm like, who's doing this part? I don't know who's saying this line. It's really well done.
Yeah.
It's almost like a morph thing, but I know it was just two people doing the voice. Maybe there was, I doubt they blended it together, but anyway.
No idea.
The other metaphorical things, like when Sophie first gets in the castle and it's a total dump, like that's got to be some like a commentary on like Howl and who he is and his personality, that like he's just a total mess. He's all over the place.
I actually wrote down notes on this. This is a very common trope in, I don't know if it's predominantly Hayao Miyazaki. I don't think he started it, because I've seen it in other animes. Specifically, there's a very similar setup in Fruits Basket, where like these three guys, well, eventually it becomes three, it starts out as two, are like living together. Shigure is kind of the owner of the house, and it is a mess. Like there's actually a really, really cute scene that I wrote down in my notes where like Toru comes in and she, you know, volunteers to like cook and clean and stuff, because Yuki and Shigure are hopeless in that department. And like there's this really cute scene where Yuki's like, I didn't know we had a rice cooker, and Toru's like, I unearthed it.
Unearthed it, wow.
And it's very cute. And I think that there's maybe just this like trope in a lot of Japanese media where there's this situation, hopeless, usually it's a dude, hopeless dude, is like, just wow, so much mess and bachelorness and whatnot. And then usually it is a female protagonist who comes in, kind of like tidies everything up, and is a catalyst for change in all of their lives.
Right.
And I mean, that's a whole other commentary of like women being that catalyst for men. I think Fruits Basket does it really well. I think this movie does it really well, where the men take on, or at least in Hal's case, the man takes on the responsibility that they need to take on as part of their arc.
Right.
So I'm not going to get into that. Just lightly say, I think the two examples I'm putting out here, Howl's Moving Castle and Fruits Basket, I think they handle it really well, even though the initial setup is kind of like, why is she doing all this work? Right.
With this one, I think it kind of works though, because that's the role she cast herself in.
Exactly.
It's not that someone has put her in that place.
Yes.
She's putting herself in there because she doesn't think that she's worthy of doing anything else.
Right.
Anything above that.
Yeah.
So,
and in Fruits Basket, Toru's doing it because she's homeless and they're taking her in, and she's like, well, I can't really pay rent. I can't afford to. So I'll do this instead to kind of pay my way.
Yeah. But I'm going to go ahead and give Miyazaki credit for,
I agree,
or at least taking advantage of a way to visually represent the changes for the characters. And I think that's one of the ways that he gets away with so little explanation in dialogue, that he shows things visually at every opportunity.
Yeah.
So I got another question for you about the book. Is the whole war angle a big part of the book too?
The war situation is in there, but it's, I don't remember really again, it's been years, but I don't remember it being as like forefront.
Mm-hmm.
And Hayao Miyazaki has a lot of war themes in his films.
Sure, yeah.
I'm trying to think if any of his films really didn't have some kind of war situation happening, whether Princess Mononoke, it's a war between
Right.
Irontown and the forest.
Yeah, it's a war one. I think even My Neighbor Totoro, are they like getting away from the war or something? I don't know.
Well,
Maybe not that
no,
one.
the mom was sick.
That's right.
in
That's
that,
what it was.
Which, I mean, if you really wanted to stretch it, a war against disease,
sure.
some kind of battle happening.
Yeah. I interpreted this film as like Miyazaki really putting a lot of his thoughts and feelings and processing his experience of growing up through the war in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
It's not set in World War II
Mm-hmm.
because it's a different world. It's just there's a war happening,
Mm-hmm.
but it would really surprise me if that's not what this is about.
Right.
It's about living in World War II in Japan. And like there was a line in there that Howl says, where Sophie asks Howl, is it the enemies or one of ours? And she sees the airship flying through the pretty flower field. And he's like, what difference does it make?
Yeah.
Right? It's just, no, the whole thing is ugly. And through the whole movie, I think that's what Howl is fighting against. He's not fighting on one side or the other.
Mm-hmm.
He's just fighting against the fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's fighting to keep the war away from Sophie at the end, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, I'm not really sure why he's going out there, but maybe just taking out his anger and aggression on the war in general. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think we're really told or shown what he's doing there at the beginning, because he's going out in his bird form. He's doing something. I don't know if he's trying to like destroy the bombs before they can cause destruction. I really don't know.
Yeah, it's curious because he's refusing the call to serve the king on the king's side of the war.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are two kings.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
At least the kingdom he lives in.
Mm-hmm.
Not Turnip Head's kingdom.
I think that was it Portsmouth or something, because there was Port something door and there was Kingsbury.
Right.
Yeah, and
right.
you can see the difference because Ports whatever, you saw a lot of naval officers, or at least officers in like naval type of attire, and then the Kingsbury you had a lot of aeronauts. So all the folks with flying machines.
You know what? You just explained it to me for the first time. I realized that he had a shop in each kingdom.
Oh, did you not realize?
I didn't realize that.
Oh, okay.
Wow, I'm so dumb. How did I not get that? But it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's on both sides, but he's on neither side.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
You're welcome.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I want to change the subject slightly.
Sure, go ahead.
Because something we see a lot in steampunk films are class commentaries. And this movie does one that we haven't really talked about yet. And that is the power dynamics between soldiers when there's wartime going on and the common folk. And granted, this requires very specific circumstances, but I think it's a really good one that like I feel like people don't really think about. I remember learning in school that I think it was during the Revolutionary War, British soldiers, there was like some kind of rule or something that like people in the colonies had to put up British soldiers basically, which of course is a huge, like, a huge burden because you're feeding this person, like you're making room for them, all this kind of stuff. And we see that kind of taking advantage of the common folk in like the opening scene where Sophie's just trying to make her way to go see her sister.
Right.
That's all she's trying to do. And you see the setup for it when she's coming down one alley, she sees the soldier and she's very clearly trying to avoid detection. And then of course she runs into two more when she's coming down another alley. They're being asshats and just general douche canoes. And then Howl, of course, comes along and is like, "Oh, hello, darling."
I didn't even catch the first one she was avoiding. I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that this is another really good commentary. Again, that usually requires very specific circumstances in order to be able to depict. But I think it's another really, really good one where we can look at that. It's not class structure, power structure. Right.
Like in any kind of militarized zone. Yeah. That there's definitely that thing that happens. Yeah. This less extreme example reminded me of like V for Vendetta, that movie where it's like dystopian.
The scene
like,
reminded me a lot of it.
Yeah.
It's a really similar set of scenes.
yeah, but like seeing it in a Miyazaki film that's like all bright colors and like nice things a lot, it was really jarring to see, as opposed to something like V for Vendetta. You can imagine like, oh, this is like a dark dystopia. That's never going to happen in our world. But this is like,
lulz.
yeah, this is real in your face. The world might look pretty and nice, but there's some ugly stuff here, and you got to look out for it. So like, good job on him, like weaving those things through. There's a lot of good character in Miyazaki's work and his writing itself.
There's a lot of subtlety.
And again, he doesn't hit you over the head with it. He doesn't do exposition. He doesn't explain all the rules. You just kind of see it, and you feel it, and you figure it out as you're watching, and even on rewatching, you're like, oh, like you said, I didn't see the first alley she dodged like a single soldier, and then she ran into two. Like, I didn't catch that part. But yeah.
Total diversion. I think the attire was kind of whatever. You know, you had some kind of Victorian-ish looking clothing, but I think it was fairly like kept fairly simple just because you got to draw all that. But the mother's hat in the first scene, or I guess it's not the first scene, it's later on. Her hat, though, Ivy Hisselpenny from the Parasol Protectorate series would be very, very pleased.
Oh,
because that hat, my goodness, if y'all love a good hat, it's right there. It has like bird wings. It has the cannon barrels. It had like the crest of Kingsbury on it. It was amazing.
And they're all going crazy over it. The crazy hat.
Yeah.
Just some other things about the visual style of this movie. Again, a lot of it is really grounded, but I like his choice of, for certain things or certain scenes, like bending reality and making things not realistic, but in a way that you feel it. Like when we meet the witch of the Waste for the first time, she's just huge and imposing, like not drawn realistic at all. Just crazy big, and also fits in that tiny little carriage. which is great. The scenes where like the scene where Howl melts and gets all dark and drippy. The two scenes in his bedroom, the first time where it's normal, but there's still like trinkets
Stuff
and things
everywhere.
It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And if you look closely, it's like all kinds of magic and mysticism things, just like every kind. Like, we're not gonna pick one system or one philosophical or spiritual practice. It's like a little bit of everything, all over the walls. But the second time we see it, it's got that like dark tunnel that it's like, this can't be real, but it's, it's got that unreal look to it. And same thing for I think a lot of the war scenes are not really depicted realistically. But just like these, it's this weird, like the war is a weird, dark thing that warps reality. Yeah,
I can see that. And I mean, granted, some of that might just be limitations of animation because somebody has to draw all that stuff. But no, I see what you mean too. Like, but I do think some of that is just because somebody has to draw it all.
No, I don't think so. I think it's all intentional. Like, they can draw whatever they want. They can draw some really crazy detailed stuff.
Right.
Like, you saw Howl's room. Like, they drew all that detail.
Right. I'm just saying,
crazy.
like, I mean, strategically, like in a war, you'd probably have more than one battle cruiser going along at like in like a battalion.
Okay, for that, sure.
But that is getting very nitpicky, I realize.
Yeah. You're going to nitpick Miyazaki? I think he knows what he's doing. Gosh.
I'm not saying he doesn't know what he's doing.
All right. So, rapid fire, any other things that you liked? Just like stuff you saw that you liked or that hit me with some rapid fire.
Okay. So a lot of the magic in this feels a lot like a D&D campaign because he's like, I can give you invisibility for 5 minutes and that is it. This special ring will like lead you toward the door. It's like a ring of homing.
Nice. Yeah.
Like I get sad and I like start oozing. Like just a lot, like, he basically takes wild shape when he turns into a bird. So, I mean, granted, it's obviously not that simplistic, but it does feel a lot like a D. And not that I'm complaining. Like, I like that. I kind of like that. Because I consider D&D, some people will at me for this, and that's fine. Fight me. But I consider D&D to have a fairly straightforward, simplistic magic system. This is the spell. This is the thing that it does. That like this is how long it lasts. Done, done, done. And I kind of like that, honestly, because I feel like the limitations on magic and D&D really make it work. I've mentioned this before. I really don't like books and movies where magic is just a fix-all. It just does everything. I'm looking at you, Once Upon a Time. Magic just does whatever you need it to do in the moment.
Right.
No, thank you. So yeah, but I like that the magic is so limited, because I think magic is one of those things that can very quickly become overpowered. And I like that it's pretty chill. And like they have basically like a warding spell on the stairs when the Witch of the Waste actually has to get out of her vehicle and climb up the stairs. And she's basically a bag of pudding by the end of it.
I really like that scene. It's weird that it's thrown in the middle. Like there's so much happening in a lot of this movie that one scene, I feel like there's a lot being done there just with the two characters, just the Sophie and the witch. And it's visually Sophie surpassing the witch, like kind of like overcoming her fear and this person who put this curse on her and like attacked her, and her just like completely pushing through and surpassing in like actuality, passing her on the stairs, even carrying the dog she thought was Howl. Like nice little joke there.
Yeah,
love it. And just finding out that this big scary witch is not really that powerful. Like, oh, she can't undo the curse. She can't climb the stairs. She's a puddle at the end of it.
This big monstrous entity is really just human, like you and me, and has her own limitations. Yeah,
that transformation, that's like the transformation scene for both of them, where the witch is kind of on the downslope and she starts on the upslope of like finding herself and finding her confidence.
Yeah. And like the motivations are great too. Like, why are you even doing this? And she's like, I've waited 50 years to be invited here. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
But like a careful what you wish for thing, you know, it's not what she thought.
Yeah.
And Sophie didn't really know why she was there, I guess, but it was definitely her come up. And I like that there was proper time given to that scene.
Yeah.
And again, everything drawn like immaculately throughout the whole thing. And that's where, and so that was another thing where the witch is drawn like really exaggerated, and like how she's collapsing into a puddle.
Yeah. Like her, like she's sort of just like, I don't know what you call those things, but they're kind of almost like a spring, and then she just like compresses. Like she was like 7 feet tall in the first time we meet her, and then she's basically like 3 or 4 feet tall.
Yeah. A line that I'm sure I will say in real life.
Oh my gosh.
Being old is worse than I thought. Sophie says the first thing. Thought that was great. There's a witch on a rampage in there.
Yeah.
Right after the stairs scene, the Witch of the Waste says, "A chair, it's mine."
Yeah.
There's her greed showing though.
Yeah, no. Like they do a really good job with that. Like they only just say like, "Oh, demon of greed," one time, but you see it borne out the entire time.
And it's her undoing. She sits in the chair and she gets all her power sucked out. Yeah. Not good for her.
Yeah.
I just need to talk a little more about my guy, my star of the show, Calcifer.
Yeah.
Voiced by Billy Crystal. Again, like an amazing performance. I think definitely the best voice performance in the film. Just great job. Fully in character throughout. One of his best line, "She likes my spark."
Oh my gosh, I love that scene so much.
And then Miyazaki draws fire blushing.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Oh, I love the scene so much. Like that's one of those moments where I just feel like all of the characters are being like their most authentic selves. Like Sophie's just being really sweet, and she's like genuinely enraptured by this power and like this experience she's having. Like she is like, I am on an adventure. And then like she is just like totally like open and vulnerable with Calcifer, like, "This is amazing. I like your spark." And he's just like, "Oh my gosh." Like she is seeing me. She is seeing like all of like my coolness, and he's so excited. I love it so much, that scene.
And he gets real big. The
Yeah.
fire gets real big.
I love it. It's so good. Hey, that's the power of somebody, paying a sincere compliment and being open with someone else.
It's great.
I love it so much.
And then later when he moves the house, they draw him muscly, the muscly fire with like pecs and abs.
He's
like
swole.
Yeah, it's just for like a few frames, but it's like you could see he's a swole fire.
That's also that's another one of my favorite scenes, because one thing I really like about this film and the depiction of Sophie's arc is that she never changes her attire. Like, I think we've all seen the high school movies where like this sort of quote unquote dorky girl, and I'm using huge air quotes around this because I hate this sort of storyline where like, oh, like the kind of nerdy girl. She changes how she looks. Like, she starts wearing makeup. She starts dressing in a way that like isn't really her, but oh, this is great because now she looks like all the other normies, and that makes her okay. And I hate that so much. And I love that in this, Sophie's attire never changes. Like, the quote unquote biggest change that happens is like she wears a blue dress most of the film, and then at the end she's wearing a yellow dress, but it's the exact same style, the same collar, the same cuffs, same length, everything.
And you notice at the very end, she keeps her gray hair.
Her starlight hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, and that's the other thing. Because in the scene where Calcifer gets all swole and big and never skip leg day.
Right.
She gives she gives him her hair. And yes, that is a physical change in her appearance, but it's not to like impress anyone or like to look like everyone else. It's, her sacrifice, and also like the visual manifestation of her letting go of that old life of hers and her accepting this new life she's choosing for herself. And I love the scene so much. It's so good.
It's just, so much good. So much good. One random shot that I really liked. There is Miyazaki doesn't really do when you think of anime, like the anime action style, but there is one like 4-second scene that one character gets an anime action shot, and it's Turnip Head.
Oh, right. When he like jumps up and spins in the air before he like jumps down to like stop the basically like a raft going down the mountain.
Yeah, you get to like the whoosh, like him like spinning, and then he jams his little like thing in the way and saves everybody. Yeah. He gets the one action shot in like all of Miyazaki's films, I think. Right. It's pretty incredible.
No, there's a lot of action shots in Princess Mononoke.
Okay, you're right. Yeah. In this film, only action shot in this film.
Pretty much.
It's Turnip Head. He gets the spotlight there for a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Well, he needed something.
Yeah. Yeah, gotta give him something. He's just a prince out trying to live in the woods as a scarecrow. That's
tough. A very Frog Prince kind of storyline.
Right. But I like that he's like, he gets rejected at the end. It's so hard. Immediately. He's like, oh, a kiss from my true love changed me back. Sorry, bro. Right. Whoops. Keep looking. But he's like, I'll be back.
Yeah. He's like, maybe your heart will change. Probably not, but okay.
Maybe that's the real tragedy in this whole story is Turnip Head, the story of Turnip Head.
He's a prince. He's gonna find someone. He'll be all right.
Yeah, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. My one of my final notes is I think this is secretly a time travel movie. The scene.
Oh, because she goes back.
She goes back. I think she actually sees young Howl and Calcifer, and her message of "Find me in the future" is what leads them to be reunited later in the future. She makes it happen herself. It's a time loop.
Okay. I see what you're saying, and I had that thought too. I don't like it though, so I kind of want to reject it because I don't like time travel movies.
Well, I do. This is a segment I'm calling Mike Makes This Into a Time Travel Movie because I want to. I think they're cool.
I think you might be right. I don't accept it though.
It's muddy enough that's left to interpretation because when she wakes up, it's very much like, okay, well, this could have just been a dream. Or it could have happened. Either way, it doesn't change the story. I just like to think it's a time travel movie. It's cool.
I know you love those.
All right, so we've been gushing over this movie the entire time.
Because it's so good.
Can you think of one thing you didn't like? We have to follow our format. Is there something you didn't like?
Come back to me.
Okay. I'll say one thing I didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like Christian Bale as Howl. I think it is great. This came out in 2004. When did Batman Begins come out? I think it was before that.
Oh, I have no idea.
So this might be the first time we hear his Batman voice. Where are the other drugs? There's that part where he's in his cave and he's all Alberti and he gets his Batman voice out.
He does. It's true. It's like, no, it's too late.
Yeah, so maybe the first instance of that. Maybe it's Miyazaki's fault that we got that voice, although I think it's great. People make fun of it. I think it's great. But my least favorite part of this movie is one of the lines by Howl. And I can't tell if it's the writing or the line delivery that I like less, but it's, Sophie, your hair, it's beautiful. It looks just like starlight.
I don't know. It's cute, I guess.
It sticks out like a sore thumb to me.
I don't know. It might just be like a translation issue. I don't know.
Again, one of those things where he had to fit all those words in a short space, so there's like not a good way to deliver it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so much cheese out of nowhere in this movie. But I had to look for it. That's the only thing I can point to. It's great.
I'll be honest. Maybe this is just the universe balancing itself after how much I hated Snowpiercer. Because, oh, yeah, this is a very different vibe here today than the Snowpiercer episode. But, like, so, like, I'm really, really picky about book adaptations. And I really love this one, too. Like, I don't even mind that they deviate from the book so much because I think they do it really well. And, like, I think this movie very much makes a claim of, like, this movie version is going to be different and this is what we're doing and you're just going to have to deal with it. And like, I'm okay with it because they're not trying to phone it in. They're like 100% very intentionally making choices to make it different. And I love them both. I have nothing bad to say about this film. Nothing.
Well, there you go. Sorry we can't follow the format. Nothing negative to say from Dana. So let's wrap it up here. We've been going a while. We are going to give it our special ratings. I think I know how this is going to go. Mm-hmm. The first one is how steampunk is this movie on a scale of 1 to 5 steam engines. How many for this movie, Dana?
Oh, 100%. It gets 5 of 5 steam engines. We've got steam-powered trolleys, steam-powered trains, probably steam-powered flying machines. We didn't really see... maybe some steam packed. We have a steam powered castle,
right? Yeah, the castle is steam powered by the fire counselor, the main man, star of the show, literal star, of the show,
literal star of the show. I love it. Well done.
I had a feeling I was going to be at 5 out of 5. Now we're going to give our individual personal enjoyment ratings. Yours is on a scale of 1 to 5 gears.
It's 5 of 5. I love it. I think this is a near perfect film.
Agreed. I'm giving it 5 out of 5 top hats. Great movie. Thank you, Miyazaki, and everyone involved for making it. So much fun.
Thank you, Diana Wynne Jones, for writing the book. Yeah.
And thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in to this episode of Steam Powered Movies. Thank you so much for listening and going this journey with us. I hope you watch the film first because it's great. And if you haven't watched it, watch it now. We've spoiled a lot of it, but there's no spoiling this movie. It's an adventure.
Also, read the book. The book is so good.
Read the book. Watch the movie. Leave a review for this podcast on your favorite podcast player of choice. Give us 5 stars. Leave a review. Maybe we'll shout you out later. You never know.
Also, tweet at us on Steam Powered Pod.
Yep.
Let us know what you thought. Tell us how much you love or maybe don't love this movie.
Go to steampoweredmovies.com for more information. And tune in next week. We'll have another steampunk movie for you. Thanks for hanging out. We'll talk to you then. See you. Bye.
Bye.
My brain stopped. Okay, I'm going to start that over and edit that part there.